Hi, I'm Jack Beecham, and welcome to AventureWorks podcast series on business strategy. AventureWorks helps independent businesses with strategy, from plans to execution. I enjoy experimenting with ideas to determine what business strategies work best. In this podcast series, I'm speaking with fellow entrepreneurs from different fields about their experience and what has worked best for them. I hope that you will find these podcasts interesting and useful in your business. You can find show notes and resources mentioned in each podcast on the website at adventureworks.com/podcasts. Thank you in advance for listening. In this episode, I am speaking with Bob Titmas. Bob is owner and CEO of ABCO Fire. In the past 22 years, ABCO has grown from its Northeast Ohio beginnings to become a market leader across a 5-state region. Our conversation has two parts. Part one is about purpose and meaning in business and in life. Part two is about exit strategies. With thanks to Bob, I hope you enjoy. I had a lot of fun.
Bob, thanks for talking with me today. I was, as I mentioned to you the other day, I was very excited and interested to see some of your comments about purpose and meaning in particularly in business owners. From a business owner's perspective, I've been writing a lot about that. I've published a little bit about it recently, and it's something that is very important to me. As you know from knowing me for a few years now, I'm an entrepreneurial person. I think that the entrepreneurial segment of society is really what moves mankind forward, and I know that can be overstated and talked about a bit too much, but it's something that I feel is true. And so to me, in anybody's life, purpose and meaning, it's highly recommended without going into too much of it right in this very second. But I wanted to talk to you about that as the first general topic, and we have an hour, I guess, slated, and I know you have a hard stop, so we'll respect that. I want to talk about that first, and then we can talk a little bit about some things about business owners that are looking perhaps to exit their company and maybe are wondering why that's what they should be doing. But I want to talk again about purpose and meaning, and so I'll shut up now and I'd like to just listen to what your thoughts are about that, and we can just have a conversation, go back and forth.
Oh, it sounds great. I think that for the future of our American way, entrepreneurism has to be one of the key drivers. And my experience is that it's easy to get involved in business to go out to prove something, and I think we can, and anybody can see what the potential benefits are from wealth creation and having the opportunity to go and live a lifestyle. But I think what is really underappreciated is the value that comes, or the personal traction that comes from having meaning in your life. And I have 200 employees, and I consider that there to be 200 families, and they have how many 800 neighbors on each left and right of them, and how many relatives. And when you think about the trickle-down effect of how you touch people and what they do on a daily basis, I think it takes on a whole bigger meaning. And I'm sure when I was younger, I would have had a narrower purpose in mind, and going through life experiences. And I think one of the things that benefits a leader or anybody in life is to take a non-linear path to life. The more that we meander, although it might seem like we're wasting time, we're actually picking up the tools and stories and the connection points that are going to be necessary for us when we get to other levels. And so my life has taken, in some ways, I've had a lot of great fortune, and there's been a nice progression. In other ways, I've gone way off the beaten path, and I think all that adds up to who you become and where I am standing right now. And what I look at is what a beautiful gift to have a business to express myself through. And if life is this short experience and this gift of consciousness, how we go and express ourselves is really how we see the world. It's our picture. And I've used the example a lot of times that every day we get up in the morning and we're a paintbrush, and you get one tile and you get to go paint a picture on that tile. Then you walk over to the wall and you paste it on the wall. And tomorrow you get up and they give you another tile and you paint that picture and you go set it on the wall. The hope is that you create a beautiful mosaic, because each of our lives is really a mosaic of all these individual days, and hopefully they add up to something. And that's one of the things that a business that can become an organic thing, and I think there's a difference. When a business is a transactional enterprise to create wealth versus a business that is a foundation for connection, and meaning comes from the way that we connect. And it's been a long journey for me, and although I'm only 52, I feel really fortunate to have had a lot of time and experience in leadership positions. And it long ago wasn't about the money. It's really about the microphone and the podium and having a captive audience and having teammates and having something that's bigger than myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's there's a number of things that I'm making some notes as you're talking there. A number of things that click with me as you're talking that I think are just so true. That yes, business is a for-profit enterprise, and even I guess there's like a tone of apology in my voice in saying that, and that's silly. The profit is simply a reflection of the value that's been created. The profit is a residual value that's left over after all the value that's come in from the customer and the value that goes back out in the form of payments to employees and to vendors and so forth. And so, hopefully, as you know, the business is successful. It's growing. There's more profit. A portion of that, at least, is reinvested into growth, and that's all creation. I mean, there's a reason why it's called wealth creation. It's not to get religious, but it is creating things. It's creating something so people don't have to sleep in caves in the dark. And it's that sounds kind of strange because people haven't done that for a long time. Maybe not in this part of the world in the last 200 years, but people do live in unfortunate circumstances still. And I would say, and I think you would agree, that to the extent that the entrepreneurial way has been allowed to flourish, there's simply more wealth and less want. Not that there's no want, but there's less want. As you mentioned, you're in your 50s. I'm in my 50s as well, and in life there is I don't know many people, if any, that have gone from A to the proverbial B in a straight line, and through a period of decades. There's a book that I've recently become aware of. I've listened to the author speak, but I haven't read the book yet. But the book is called Vagabond. And he's talking about traveling as an experience, a growth experience and so forth. But as you were talking, I was thinking about one of the things he said in this interview I was listening to. He says that you're in an unknown land, and you don't necessarily need to have a plan. Just start walking until your day becomes interesting. And I think life is a lot. You don't need to travel. Travel's great, but you don't need to travel to find that that's true inside of a business. That you start out with, you need to make a profit, and you want to make a profit, and so you discover, well, how do I do that? How do I add the value? How do I have customers that keep coming back? And you start to, I think, see that there's more than just the concrete service or product that you're providing. If it's done well, you're doing something, you're connecting with that customer and with your employees at a level much higher. There's another book on my list that's called Great Design, and that's what they talk about in terms of connecting, a great company connecting with their customers. And everybody uses Apple as a great great example nowadays, but that great design of a business. There are the products involved, but the design of the business, and I think that's what you were talking about when you're talking about the families involved, and the employees, the families, the neighbors, the neighborhood, the community, and that your business is a part of that. It's serving that, and it's receiving value back from that. So those things come up in my mind as you're talking about purpose and meaning.
Let me circle back on a couple of things that you said, and I love the vagabond story, and I think that's all we all are. We're relative to our pure potential. We all are kind of infants, lost. But you mentioned moving forward, and I think Stephen Covey did that. You have to move forward. If you're stuck, you're not going to find the answer where you are. You have to raise your thinking, as Einstein said, or be proactive and walk forward, as Covey said. And they're all really the same message. It's that there's a reason why you can't see it from where you are, and you have to move. And then begin with the end in mind and first things first. And so I think those principles apply universally throughout our lives. And the other point I want to circle back on is this wealth creation. And I think there's a misconception about possession. And we think of wealth and possessions as something that we can attach to ourselves and that we can own. And I don't think that's the way that life works. We're really stewards of these resources, just like we are stewards of our own bodies. And we're just entrusted them for this time period that we're here. And so when we look at this business, this anyone's business, it's really not possession of someone. It's its own thing. And if we're fortunate enough to be in leadership positions or ownership positions, then we have the responsibility of stewardship. And I think that's what drives these values and guiding principles inside a business is really starts with the fundamental of stewardship, where the thing is bigger than yourself. And that takes recalibrating, and that takes a little bit of humility, and it takes kind of getting knocked in the teeth a few times. And for me, I had open heart surgery a year and a half ago and had some other challenges, and it makes you look at life from the outside, and then you look how precious it is, and you look at the ability to sustain things, and we're just being stewards of the resources we've been given. And if you do a good job, if you really stand for something well and you attract the positive energy, people will give you more resources. And I think that's the bottom line about a profit, is it's the customer saying you're being a good steward of these resources. And if your employees stay with you, it's because they're respecting that you're being a good steward of these resources. And so I think leadership at its ultimate position is really being a shepherd and a steward of resources that other people are entrusting you with. And let's face it, you cannot take them with you. You're just, when you pass on from here, they're not going with you. So the sooner we can learn those lessons and treat them as the gifts of stewardship that they are, I think the more that we can evolve into those leaders that have purpose and meaning.
Yeah, and when I was a teenager in my 20s, I thought of ownership as ownership and stewardship as something vaguely communistic, and it really was that stupid in my own head that I felt that the owners had they were in the best position to use these resources and so forth. And the kernel of that is true, but it misses the greater nuances and the greater meaning in this concept of collecting energy and shepherding the energy itself in better ways. And I just look back at the kind of the smaller vision that I had, and with embarrassment that how did that happen? How did I come from that? But thank goodness I did come from that. That I'm learning. I think I'm always learning. But this idea of stewardship, I think you're absolutely right. That it's not going with you into the ground. And if it's anything somebody really wants, they're going to come get it from the box anyway. So
yep.
You're going to die with this as much money as you had when you were born. So it's amazing to me.
Can I roll the clock forward on this? Because I think there is a danger out there, and one of the things that's happened in the United States from an ownership standpoint is not everybody would agree with what we just said, and why they don't agree is because they're just an investor. So we have all this private equity and venture money, and those are dollar invested people, but they're not have an emotional attachment to any of the mission. And so more and more of these really wonderful family mid-market businesses are getting bought by private equity and these professionally run bigger or publicly traded firms, and it takes away the purposeful mission that is created in a small mid-market business. And I think we have a challenge going forward because this is one of those dramatic examples of the haves and the have-nots. And if we want to build middle class and we want to empower from the middle, we really ought to try to hang on to these businesses, and we ought to really respect and empower them. And unfortunately, we're taxing them and we're regulating them, and they're being motivated to sell. And unfortunately, the people they're selling to have a whole different agenda. And what we're going to be left with is that the majority of all the people are going to be employed by an owner that you never see, and their mission is really about the success of the firm versus their connection to community and the value they provide to the individual families. So, and these are smart people, and I think it's why the government's always chasing from behind on this issue. Is now the private equity firms and people have this new term called conscious capitalism. And they recognize that there's a whole strain of businesses out there that are off limits to them because they understand what they'll do to it. Well, they found a new name for it and raising funds to try to go and address specifically those needs. And I'm sure there's good people out there that will do this and try to do it in a sustainable way. And there's probably others that are just putting a new name on something, trying to remarket, or mask the original intention. So I'd say that because my position is only is in the little world that I exist in, and unfortunately, there's so much money out there. There's been so much wealth created, and there's been so much wealth inherited, and it doesn't know where to go, and it needs to be placed into income-earning activities, which are businesses. But there's a downside to that, and one of them is that those owners require a return, and that return may not coincide with the natural life cycle of that business. They're being harvested, the crops are being harvested before they're ready.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I agree, and I don't want to get into too many, I guess, technical detail type things. Let me make a caveat. There will be some things that you and I will reference, like I mentioned a couple of books, for instance. There will be some show notes or notes to the conversation on the company website post, and so it'll have references with URLs and so forth to things that we may be mentioning in passing right now. One of the things that I would say is that I consider myself from the Austrian School of Economics, and Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek, they talked about these sorts of things in a number of levels, one of which is the business cycle itself, and the business cycle being a creation of central banking and the credit expansion, specifically the credit expansion activities of the central banks, and that the banking, the central banks create the bubble that people love, that they think they love, but what they don't realize is that with that bubble comes the bust that nobody likes. And so here since 2008, we've had quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many, with little or no effect. That apparent effect on the real economy, as you will, the actual creation of jobs and the creation of new wealth. What we've seen instead was that money has to go somewhere. So what we've seen are the banks that are closest, the biggest banks that are closest to that money supply. When the Fed lets that money out through their credit expansion facilities, they absorb that money. They didn't turn those around into loans in 2008, 2009, and 10. They turned those around into consolidating their balance sheets and buying other banks. And that money has gone through. It won't always follow the same path. it followed itself. It went into the housing, what turned out to the housing bubble that exploded in 2007 and 8. We don't know necessarily where this particular bubble is going to go, but I guess where this comes back to your comments is that I think the professional financial investment firms, they know that. They might not say it on TV or write about it, but they know that not money, access to money is not instantaneously available to all borrowers at the same time. And the people that get it earlier get the more of the value of the money before it's potentially valued. And so these financial investors that are coming in and buying up assets and consolidating industries and so forth, they, at some level, they perhaps are adding value, but they're really adding value in a transitory financial asset type way. It's asset inflation. They're not more assets. They're just more expensive assets. A house that was, a one-bedroom rambler down in the swamps of Florida that was a $20,000 house when it was built, but somehow became a $200,000 house. It's probably it's with inflation, it might be a $200,000 house, but everything else is 10 times as much too. And so that's, I think, where you're exactly right, is that you have this class of investors that are, in my opinion, living off of the one of the flaws of the central banking system that we live in. So,
in the past, it wasn't a problem because technology provided a governor to speed. So a lot of the issues that have happened are really the acceleration of the cycle because of speed. And now those differences that you described can be exploited in huge ways. And I think if you really distill this need for speed, and I guess that maybe I'm just simple-minded on this, it affects everything. Our kids have so much pressure to get into college because you better be on track early. And we never can find good employees. Well, because we don't have time to train them. And everything comes down to this urgency. And it's the quarterly reports from the public companies that are driving people's 401ks and who's in charge of those things. And that didn't happen because the natural law of farming had to go through its cycle. But the really bright people with those resources have been able to kind of control nature in that way and really accelerate the speed. The genetic engineering of food. We've sped up our ability to get things done, but that has created a really lumpy society where there's just a few winners and not a lot of others. And the people that are behind, you don't ever catch up, or at least it's hard for me to see how we're going to, when the people that are in front are just putting more heat on the fire. They're just going faster and faster. And I'm not sure they're any happier, because you have a lot of those people creating a lot of wealth, and they find themselves not necessarily fulfilled. And so back to the topic at hand, I think this is one of the head fakes in society that we think is good, is this speed, and it increases our perceived standard of living, but really the quality of life goes down. And so although we have more stuff and more conveniences, I don't know that there's a higher quality of life that's associated with that.
Well, I would agree with that. And I think a couple of things. One, I think in some manner or form we are living in a financial bubble that will pop in some way. If I knew the answer when and how, I would soon be a rich person. But I think we have a financial bubble coming that's going to burst, I should say. I think another way, you talk about education and kids, the pressure to get into schools, particularly the elite schools. There's just more and more studies and evidence out there that the return on investment simply isn't there on its own terms, let alone the quality of the education in terms of becoming the traditional liberal arts type education of a well-rounded person.
Colleges weren't vocational schools in the past. They were places for people to become adults and learn how to think. And it really was a launching ground and a starting point. It has now become a competitive landscape to get ahead, and those separations that kids start off with are perpetuated throughout life, and I think that's really a shame.
And it drives the kids crazy. I know firsthand that there's just kids so worried about their grade on some advanced placement. It's not good enough to simply take U.S. history. You need a 5.0 and an advanced placement history test class to get to a mid-level school, and or that kind of mechanical thinking that I need to be in 15 different extracurricular activities, and I need to have this grade point average, and I need to do all these things, and the kind of going back to the idea of purpose and meaning in anybody's life, let alone a business owner. Well, why are you doing all that? Well, why are you getting on that hamster wheel? Why are you chasing that thing that you don't even know what the value of that thing is? You're going to get into some overpriced school and owe $100 plus thousands of dollars when you get out. And what are you going to do? And are you going to enjoy it? Did you learn anything about what brings meaning to you or happiness to your life? No, I need to get into the school so I can get this job, so I can pay off these bills, so I can get bigger house, so I can have bigger bills.
I'll throw a book plug in because you've done it. Simon Sinek has a book called "It Starts with Why," or it's all about why. There's something and it's just speaks to exactly what you're talking about, and it uses examples in the business world of why Apple is so good at marketing, because they do a very good job in a simple way of telling you why you need this product and why they exist. And if we seem to skip those steps, and I think there's a natural progression in life that we go from dependence to independence, and we desire then at our highest levels interdependence. But we have a lot of people going from dependence to trying to be interdependent, and we're skipping steps, and it's not we're not learning all the lessons that we need to fill our toolbox with the right equipment that we're all going to need down the road.
No, I agree with you. You mentioned, we both have talked here about the financial, purely financial investor, divorced from the operation of the business. But one of the most people would be on the short list of most people as far as great investors, of course, is Warren Buffett and his partner Charlie Munger. And they're in a nutshell, their investment philosophy is buy and hold. Buy good companies that have long-term value, and leave the management in place, and they leave that culture in place. They're not looking for that quick return, and they've outlasted a lot of short-term traders, day traders, short-term traders, whatever you want to call them. They've been at it since the 60s. They're very old gentlemen and very rich gentlemen, and they've approached it from an literally old school way. And I think that'll probably, however this financial bubble bursts, I think their approach will probably survive better than people that are highly leveraged and have been just cobbling together companies to build a transaction to make a fee. And that kind of leads me a little bit into what the other topic I would like to talk to you about, which is this idea that owners in their 50s, 60s that have been at it for decades, they're I think told, or most of the literature or most of the marketing messages are that you want to get this company to a point where you can sell it and you can retire and go, do whatever it is you want to do with the rest of your life. And nowadays, the rest of your life, thank goodness, advances in technology and healthcare and just basic, as you mentioned earlier, stewardship of your own body. People are just more aware of what they consume, tobacco and sugar and what have you. People are living longer, and so the idea of retiring at 65 and maybe having 10 years to go, on the big grand tour, is just, if it was ever true, it's not true any longer. And so I think that's a function, or that's a problem for anybody thinking about retirement. But I think particularly for owners, and I know you've approached this in a different way, and I've been interested in this way, and that owners don't need to sell their business. Why would they build something up over the course of decades and then sell it at whatever price, and go through maybe a kind of a gut-wrenching experience. I don't even know maybe about it. A gut-wrenching experience of leaving all of that behind. And perhaps if they didn't structure the business properly so we could survive without them, they're also, when they walk out the door, they're taking their value out the door. So the price of their business is discounted tremendously. They're not going to get what they thought they'd get out of it. And then when the check comes in the mail, so to speak, they turn around and they give that to their financial advisor and say, go play the ponies. Go get me 9%. Pray to God that you're going to get me 9% and get me through the next recession, and I'm going to live off of that and hope for the best. And that just sounds like a ridiculous way to go. And I know we touched on it. We talked a little bit ago, a day or so ago about it. And you had some nice words about that yourself. I wanted to hear what you'd repeat that and go into some more detail.
I think if you look at it from the way you described it, it sounds kind of silly. Here's an owner who spent decades creating something that they have learned how to mitigate risk, and they go and take their wealth and they put it in something that they're led to believe has less risk, but they have totally less control. That's the reason why they've been good as an entrepreneur, is they learn how to tilt the table in their favor. And so they're taking really the cards out of their hand and giving them to somebody else, and that doesn't make any logical sense to me. And if they're totally burnt out and they recognize that they no longer have the capacity, the determination, the desire to handle the pressures of the business, that's one thing. But to justify it based on the financials is really hard for me to make a logical connection there, because it really isn't logical. It's just not logical for a guy that's been successful and has captained his own ship to go and turn it over to someone else. That just doesn't make sense.
Agreed, and that's where I've been doing some of my own homework, and your situation. We don't want to talk about confidential information here, but what you've done in bringing in a generation of managers, I think it kind of fits with this Buffett approach to being an investor, and to me it's a sense of moving from an owner manager role or an owner operator role to strictly an owner investor, but in all the best senses of that term. That the formalities are secondary, but just for the sake of the discussion, what's wrong with bringing in management that can do that, the day-to-day management, staying on board, creating a board, and becoming the chairman of that board, and still shepherding the company, being involved as you want to be, to get out of the burned out level of detail, but maybe once that day-to-day kind of thing is gone, maybe some of that residual drive and interest in the business remains, and to still have a connection with something that's meaningful to you. You spent decades developing it, building it into something. Now come back to the numbers, something that you understand, something you know how it makes money, you know how to make sure that it's making money, and you know what the early warning signs are when things are about to go, the wheels are about to go off. You have your control, and you still have your nest egg, and you can move forward without betting on the stock market.
Well, I think that's the ideal way to do it. And why don't people do it is they're not willing to delay gratification in the short term. You have to live, underneath your means and provide a little extra so you can develop some people underneath you. You have to have some humility and look at yourself as just one link in the chain, and that the next guy can probably do it as well or better than you. And so there's a number of, I think, personal qualities that need to be developed for you to see it that way. I think, we would all in a perfect world want that and do that, but I think some people get trapped as they're living above their means, and it's their way out. It's the way that they can get out of the treadmill that they're on, is to pass the problems to somebody else and not have to be around to deal with them. And some people just have egos that says, hey, there's no one else that can do it as good as me, and especially if they're watching. They bring them in and they're just going to meddle, and they're going to have a difficult time. We hear the term helicopter parents, and they're really helicopter business owners have the same issue. And I think that's the requirement is to have some humility and perspective on yourself. That I found two guys, really a whole leadership team that all individually is capable of being, much more dynamic and successful than I've been. But the only way they're going to do that, and the gift that I had is I was 29 years old when I had a leadership position. The only way they're going to do that is you get at bats, and you got to get to the plate to really start to see the ball clearly and pick it up out of the pitcher's hand. And I think what happens is the guy hangs on too long, and then the guy who's senior in the group gets designated, the guy with the highest level of skills, but he's a long way from being ready, because what he really needs is he needs to have his kimono open, and he needs to be scrutinized from 360 degrees. And it's really easy to sit in chair number 2 and say, oh boy, I do that. Yeah, wait till you're in chair number 1. Those decisions aren't so easy. And so I look and say, the sooner I can get these guys into these positions to have 360 degree scrutiny on them, and let them fix their own mistakes. I'm there to love them, encourage them, support them. I'm there if they want me to come in. But they know that if I come in, I'm going to be neutering them. I'm going to be really stripping their courage. I'm going to be, other people will perceive them differently. And so there's an agreement we come to, and that I came to with my guys. Hey, I'm here, and I think you're ready. You probably think you're ready too, but I'll tell you what, in 6 months you're going to say, I'm not ready. But you got to have the courage to know that there are going to be challenging times, and it's going to take you a while to figure this out. It is not as easy as it looks sitting in chair number 2 to go into chair number 1. And so I think what we need to do is we need to get our people just like our children. I'd rather have my kids in 5th and 6th grade make mistakes and have a chance to fix them and gain independence than wait till they're 28 years old. And I think that's the same principle applies to these young leaders. We need to give them more opportunity, more responsibility, but they need to be mentally coached to know that it is not going to be easy. And just because you're the best salesman or you've got an MBA and you're a financial wizard doesn't mean you have any clue what's going to hit you from this leadership position. And I think that's what we've done, and I think the guys have had some rocky situations, but together they go lean on each other. They lean on me when they need to, and they're just guys of high character. And I think that's a combination and a recipe for success. And it takes it all. I couldn't move on without high character people that I could trust, and those guys couldn't move on really kind of without each other, and knowing that I'm there, but they don't want to make that call. I'm really the last call they make, and they know they need to have exhausted kind of all their other creative resources before they come to me. Not because I can't solve it, because they know what that does to them.
Right. There's a sense of ownership and pride, and do it themselves. We can do this, and those are all good things. That's what you're fostering, and that's good stuff. I want to ask you some details about a recipe or steps that an owner that's in a situation similar to you, what you would recommend that they do first, or second. What are the most important things? But before I ask you that, you mentioned earlier that you had a heart surgery was a year and a half ago now?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel that it takes that sort of event to how much importance do you give that particular event and what you went through with that? And do you feel your thinking was evolving prior to that incident, or what relationship does that event have to your
personally
thinking?
I've been on this journey for my entire life, and I was one of those kind of kids who had scripted out my life and had 5 and 10 and 15-year goals since I was 18 years old, and I was pretty good at knocking those bogeys down and putting myself in that position. And I really tried to to read and study, and I had accumulated a lot of knowledge and stuff. But you know what I was doing? I was missing a good game at times because I was so fixated on what I knew and trying to find the opportunities to inject my knowledge that I didn't have all my senses working. I wasn't listening all the time. I wasn't feeling all the time. I wasn't open to all those things all the time. And so for me, the trigger event of actually knowing how to express myself came through my health challenge. But it wasn't all the knowledge. It was something broke free about me becoming more unconditional in the way I love people, more unconditional about my mission, vision, and value statements, those kinds of things. And I think I had all the knowledge, but it was 5% of me had a big blockage in it. And so there was a lot of goodness that didn't come out. Or when it came out, it came out in a different color or shade or tone than I really meant it to. And so I think I missed a lot of connection points. I think I missed gaining a lot of traction in things. And even though I did have a lot of success in my life, it's really, I think, really growing much faster as I more let go of some of my own personal insecurities and shed that baggage. And so, for me, it took something to really go deep inside myself. And I don't know if that answers the question directly, but for me, there was a tipping point. But clearly, I had been on this path, but I was hitting my head against the wall, and that kind of freed me up to look at it a different way.
Well, I think that does answer the question. I think in my experience, and then just I'm a reader of fiction and just a good story, and just my own case, it's not that the quote unquote precipitating event is like a pool ball bouncing off a rail, that you were going this way and then you went that way. It's not that, but it seems to be some kind of divine coincidence, or some kind of
serendipity, I call it.
Yeah, okay, serendipity, where you start to become aware of some of the things that you were absolutely positive of. Maybe you're 90% sure, and all these things. There's a few things that maybe you didn't quite think were as important, but you start to you're in a kind of a process of reevaluating, and then all of a sudden some event happens, and it's like, uh-oh. And it sort of it helps you crystallize this thinking that's already started. And I was fortunate enough to meet you and thank you to work with you or work for you prior to you having a heart attack. And I saw you. It seemed to me that you were already moving in this direction that you're talking about. But something happened in that actual health event that kind of crystallized your thinking.
The way I think I describe it in the simplest terms, I'm just trying to learn to get out of my own way. And the heart issue, I took a trip to India and I saw extreme poverty. I took a trip to Israel and I saw war and conflict, in the Middle East, and all those little pebbles that you throw in the pond to give me something to stand up on that was taller and kind of get my head above water. And like you said, there wasn't one thing. It was just a bunch of little pebbles thrown in the pond, and I was trying to seek something, and now I've learned that I don't really need to seek it. I just need to let it in because it's all around us. And I was pushing and trying real hard and getting in my own way. And now I'm trying to let life unfold in a different way and not get in my own way. And it's just amazing what you attract when you are more open like that.
Yes, serendipity you mentioned, I think. Well, what would you recommend to anyone, but specifically a business owner that's in a similar situation that so short of having a heart issue, a health issue, what would you do? What advice would you give them to kind of help them to turn the corner in how they're thinking about their business and what's next for them in their life?
Try not to do anything dramatically, which includes a big sale, a total liquidation, or some total life change. Because I think there's a reason where you're standing right where you are. Whoever hears this and every single person is somewhere for a reason. And to think that you're not and think that you need some significant drastic change, I think misses the point and the beauty of your whole life before, that you've already lived. And so life is this dial, and I think you want to just slowly turn it to an increased focus on where you're in total balance. What is the path of least resistance to you? What are the things that take the least amount of energy to you or create the most positive energy? That life's like this metronome, and the further that thing is swinging side to side, that pendulum, the more energy it's taking. As a business owner, you want to look down the road and say, how do I put myself in and live my whole life in a balanced way? And I think that's what a wonderful goal in a vehicle to have to do that, where you can blend your life and your business and your purpose and your touch of other people into something. But it starts with you and knowing really what yourself is and really being aware of where you're wasting energy. And so I want to train people. I want to work on the middle of our business. I want to work where the people are faced with those moment decisions with a customer or a fellow employee. I like the strategy stuff, but you know what? Those guys are already going to be as good or better than me, and they've heard me talk about this in 3, 4, 5, 6 years in a row. It's what, there isn't that much. You look at what we did last year. You look at what resources you got. You go, but where I like to be and where I feel like I'm making a difference is in the middle of our business. And I think that's what the business owner should do. If you like to be the creator, then work towards really letting the majority of your time and energy in life be in that place. If you just like the strategic stuff, well, then let everybody else do the other things. And you really focus on those things. And I think it's an awareness of self and an intentional path towards putting your life in that place of balance. And we think as a business owner, we got to do all these things, and no one can do them as well. Well, the truth is if we do what we do really, really well, we kind of make the other stuff small. and it's I think that's Gallup has all those studies about StrengthsFinder and stuff. And I think that's the message I got from stuff like that is we want to enhance our strengths. But we're never going to get rid of our weaknesses. All we can do is diminish their impact on our lives by making our strengths so strong. And I think that's really the message for a business owner. Make your strengths so strong and focus your life in the place where you get that energy and that's easy for you. And you'll find the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the trying to mitigate your weaknesses. I mean, you can spend your whole life doing that. The fact is you have special talents and capacities that make you unique, that you can contribute, and if you can find out what those are and focus on those, that's kind of the 80-20 rule applied to yourself. Find out the critical few things that make you special, that make you most valuable to your fellows, to humanity, to your family, to your neighbors, whatever, and develop those, and find people that can do everything else better than you for the other things, and don't worry about your weaknesses so much unless you need a hobby. Well, what would you say, I guess, concretely to an owner as far as at some level, if they want to step out of the day-to-day business, that means somebody needs to step forward. What would they need to do first? Is it hiring the right people, setting up the right structure first, getting the strategy, the essential strategy kind of nailed? What sequence of events, I guess, or what went through your head, and what did you try and do in what order to plow the way for you?
The first is the assessment of self. The first is because the person who's going to mess it up is yourself, because you can. So you got to find a way to get yourself out of the way. The second is you have to have a strong CFO. The bottom line is that the only way you're going to trust and give up control is that there is some highly trustworthy, competent person with their hand on the checkbook and their hand on the working capital of the business. And so, you can make it all fancy, but the truth is you start from the back room and you work your way forward. And it's like a good sports team. You win championships with that defense, and I think administration is defense. And so you go and you really build a solid defense. And if you're fortunate enough to fill that, then you keep moving forward. But I don't think you go forward as an owner until you have your defense in place. And I think that the financial controls it's what you're going to worry about. It's what you're going to stress about. It's what you're going to obsess about. It's what you're going to meddle in. I mean, so the thing to solidify is to have that position of strength in your back office.
And that makes sense to me. I know from your situation that you've got a good people. You found really a good team, and you're working together well, and so I see that in your case specifically, and just in terms of general principles, that makes sense. It's not simply that's how you did it. That it makes sense to do it that way, to start from, as you say, defending the money, defending the lifeblood of the company. Their cash comes in, typically it goes out first and needs to come back, making sure that it does come back, it comes back in a timely fashion, and then you have the working capital to move forward without having to worry about payroll and just the day-to-day operation of business and continued growth. So that makes perfect sense to me.
A great sales guy is going to raise your business, but it might only raise your business from his desk. A great CFO is going to raise everyone in your business. The trust, the confidence, they're managing the oil and gas in the machine, and that's going to raise everybody. And I think, the first place is to look, we think of leverage points in our business is really those positions where you get a multiplier effect. That's why I want to spend time in the middle of our business. If one of my technicians out on the road has a bad day, well, he himself has a bad day and probably the 4 or 5 customers he touches. But if that administrator or coordinator in the office has a bad day, she touches 35 techs a day, and the 4 or 5 people that are sitting and working with her right in the office, you don't know what the ripple effect is. It might be 300 people have a bad day if she has a bad day. And so you really want to affect and try to really love the people that have the most connected touch. And I drew the analogy to our team. The skeletal system is the administration, and our techs and our salespeople are the muscular system. But the nerve center is the coordinators and customer service and administrators, and they're the people that. I had a tooth abscess over Christmas, and one little tooth that I can't tell you the pain. It was worse than open heart surgery. It's getting a root canal, and it's the nerves to the whole body. And so I think that's a business owner really wants to stimulate sales and grow top line and do all this stuff. But I think you really want to be thoughtful about how this organism works. And I talked about defense, and the next thing is to work on your nerve center. And that's when you'll know something's wrong. You want to be an absentee owner, you want to take your eye off the ball a little bit, you better have a great nerve center so that the issues are escalated properly and they're dealt with appropriately and quickly and professionally. And if you don't have that, by the time it gets to your wonderful senior managers, well, they have very limited choices in how they can remedy those problems. And so a nimble organization not only has leadership throughout it, it has a really, really well-tuned nerve system.
Yeah, I agree. I was just speaking with a customer service consultant about this very topic that it's so important, and it seems to be that you have a department called customer service, and they are the ones who are in charge of communication. And no, that's not how it works. It's communication throughout the company, and it's everybody that's that's interacting with the community, whether they're customers or other stakeholders. Like for instance, you're in your business, you're dealing with regulatory agencies, fire departments, and so forth, and communicating with those people in a respectful manner that this is important, that this needs to be done for the safety of the building and for all the important reasons. And if that's not right, if that communication, those pathways, those neuron pathways are not firing properly, you're going to have a problem in it, but it's going to show up in a kind of a sore muscle, if you will, rather than where the problem really originated. Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you, Bob, and I see we've got just a minute or two left. I know you had a hard stop at the top of the hour, and so I'd love to talk to you more about this online, offline, and so I just want to say thank you, and looking forward to getting the details of this out and to the transcript out, and so other people can then hopefully find some value in it, and that'll be great.
I'm honored that you thought of me, and I'm grateful to have discussions like this. I think that the topic that you're on, I couldn't think is more important, and I don't want to try to put the position of you and I in a position of self-importance, but the topic's really important, and the future of our traditional way of life, in many ways, is one of the things that's at stake here, and being able to have meaning at work, I don't think is just an extra benefit. I think it's what's going to be necessary, and as you talked about bubbles and bursts and stuff, as if there was ever a huge scarcity of resources, the things would change, and I think that's the way that we sustain our lifestyle is that we really integrate it with our lives and our purpose, and easier said than done. And like I said, I'm a long way from being a mature adult in this. I'm just a kid trying to grow up and figure this out, and but I love it, and it's meaningful, and it's something I feel really grateful and fortunate to be a part of. Thank you, Jack.
Hey, thank you. Thanks again. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.